Jungkook stopped singing in the middle of the chorus when he looked at Jimin. That look broke all the defenses of the heart loudly fire. A concert shatters when Jungkook freezes mid-chorus at Jimin's gaze, revealing buried love, fear, and a moment that changes everything. The music was at its loudest when Jungkook stopped. "I can't," his voice cracked on the open vowel, the word swallowed by the roar of the stadium lights. And then there was only breath, ragged and too human, caught in his throat as his eyes found Jimin's across the stage. For a heartbeat, the world forgot how to move. The bass hummed like a held breath beneath Jungkook's feet. Sweat slid down his spine, cooling too fast. He tasted metal where he had bitten his lip without realizing. Thousands of light sticks blurred into a galaxy, but Jungkook saw only one face, pale under white light, eyes wide with a question he had never dared to ask aloud. This was not how the chorus was supposed to go. The song had been written to be safe, bright, a promise without teeth. Jungkook had practiced the smile in mirrors, practiced the way his shoulders loosened when he sang it, practiced the distance. He had practiced not looking at Jimin like this. But when Jimin lifted his gaze, soft, unguarded, a little broken, the practiced distance collapsed. Jimin didn't move. He always moved first. Tonight he didn't. He stood there with his hands half-curled at his sides as if bracing against a wind only he could feel, the small scar on his knuckle catching the light. Jungkook knew that scar. He knew the habit Jimin had of tapping twice before stepping onto a mark, the way he hummed when anxious, the way his laugh changed when it hurt. He knew too much. He had always known too much. The crowd began to murmur. Cameras hovered. Time stretched thin. Jungkook lowered the microphone a fraction. His pulse thundered in his ears, louder than the music. He thought of the night 3 years ago when Jimin had sat on the studio floor, back against the wall, fingers pressed to his eyes as if holding something in. Jungkook had said nothing then. He had learned silence early. Silence had kept him alive. Silence had also been the blade. Now silence cut again. Jimin took a step forward, then stopped, as if the stage itself had teeth. His eyes shone, not with tears but with restraint, and that was worse. Jungkook had always feared this look, the look that asked for truth without demanding it, that forgave before it was earned. It broke defenses because it didn't attack them. "I'm here," Jimin mouthed, so small it might have been imagined. Jungkook lifted the mic again. The chorus should have restarted. Instead, he sang a line that wasn't there, a raw thing he had never planned to give away. The note wavered, then steadied, pulled straight by the gravity between them. The band followed him because they always did. The crowd gasped because they could feel it even if they didn't know why. As he sang, memories rose like heat. The first time Jimin had taught him how to breathe between counts, the argument in a hotel hallway that ended with both of them laughing too hard to stand. The night Jungkook had watched Jimin walk away because staying would have meant choosing something terrifying. Jungkook's fear had always worn logic like armor. He told himself timing was wrong, that love could wait. Love had waited. It had waited until now, when it refused to be patient any longer. The lights dimmed, a wash of blue. Jimin finally moved. He crossed the space between them, slow and deliberate, each step a decision. Jungkook smelled the citrus of Jimin's cologne, felt the air shift. He sang to Jimin and only Jimin, the rest of the world reduced to static. Jimin reached out, not touching, fingers hovering at Jungkook's wrist, a question asked with skin. Jungkook's hands shook. He let them. He sang the last line softer, letting the vulnerability show, and the stadium leaned in like it might crack. When the song ended, there was a silence so deep it felt sacred. Then the crowd erupted, a wave of sound that knocked tears loose. Jungkook laughed once, breathless and disbelieving, and the sound startled him. He lowered the mic and finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper, meant for one person. "I was afraid," he said. Jimin nodded once. "I know." They stood there, two people who had built careful walls and found them useless in the face of one honest look. The cameras caught it. The world would talk. Jungkook felt the familiar urge to retreat, to apologize for wanting, to hide behind choreography and schedules. He didn't. He took a breath the way Jimin had taught him, slow and deep, and let his shoulders drop. After the encore, in the quiet that followed the storm, they sat on the edge of the stage with their feet dangling, sweat cooling, hearts still racing. The air smelled like ozone and confetti glue. Jimin bumped Jungkook's shoulder, gentle. "You changed the song," Jimin said. Jungkook smiled, small and real. It needed to be changed. In the end, nothing else dramatic happened. No grand declarations, no neat answers. Just two people choosing not to look away. The defenses had broken not because they were weak, but because they were no longer needed. And when Jungkook looked at Jimin again, he didn't stop singing. He sang like someone who had finally learned what the song was for. The hallway behind the stage was louder than the stadium in a different way, filled with hurried footsteps, murmured apologies, the sharp crackle of radios. But Jungkook heard none of it as Jimin grabbed his wrist and pulled him into a dark rehearsal room, the door closing with a thud that sounded final. "What was that?" Jimin demanded, his voice low but shaking, the kind of anger that came from fear, not pride. "You rewrote the song in front of everyone. You froze. Do you have any idea what that does to us?" Jungkook leaned back against the mirror, its surface cold through his damp shirt. His chest still burned from singing, from stopping, from starting again with his heart exposed. "I know exactly what it does," he said, and the honesty in his voice surprised even him. "That's why I did it." Jimin laughed once, sharp and humorless, running a hand through his hair. "You always do this. You decide something alone, then throw it at me when there's no escape." "That's not fair," Jungkook shot back, pushing off the mirror. "I waited years. I swallowed everything. I followed the rules you never said out loud." Jimin stepped closer, too close, their breaths colliding. "I was trying to protect you." "No," Jungkook said, heat rising, words tumbling faster now. "You were protecting the silence, and I was suffocating in it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room smelled of dust and sweat and the faint citrus that clung to Jimin. Outside, the crowd chanted their names, unaware that something fragile was cracking just meters away. Jimin's shoulders sagged, the fight draining out of him. "When you stopped singing," he said quietly, "I thought something terrible had happened. I thought I lost you." Jungkook's throat tightened. He had nightmares about that exact thing, waking up with his hands clenched, convinced he had already ruined everything. "I stopped because I saw you," he admitted. "Because you looked at me like you always do when you're about to disappear. I couldn't pretend anymore." Jimin's eyes flickered, pain flashing across his face. "You don't know what it costs me to stand there and not reach for you." "Then stop not reaching," Jungkook said, the words reckless and desperate. "Say something, fight me, tell me to stop." Jimin shook his head slowly. "If I tell you to stop, will you?" The question landed hard between them. Jungkook hesitated just long enough for the truth to answer on its own. "No." That did it. Jimin turned away, packing the room, hands trembling. "This is how scandals start," he said bitterly. "This is how they tear us apart." Jungkook followed him, grabbing his arm. "Listen to me. I'm not asking for a headline. I'm asking you to look at me the way you did out there and not pretend it's nothing." Jimin spun back, eyes blazing. "You think I've been pretending?" His voice cracked, and suddenly the anger was gone, replaced by something raw. "Every time you smile at someone else, every time you step back from me, I have to remind myself why we're doing this. I hate that you think I'm untouched by it." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Jungkook loosened his grip, his thumb brushing the inside of Jimin's wrist where his pulse jumped. "Then why does it feel like I'm alone in wanting more?" Jimin closed his eyes, breathing out slowly, like he was choosing his next words with care. "Because wanting more is dangerous," he said, "and I'm tired of being brave." The confession hit Jungkook harder than any shout could have. He stepped closer, their foreheads almost touching. "I'm tired too," he whispered, "but I don't want to be tired without you." Jimin opened his eyes, and for the first time there was no wall there, no careful calculation. Just exhaustion and longing and a fierce, stubborn affection. "You really don't know how to back down," he said softly. Jungkook smiled, small and sad. "Not from you." A knock on the door shattered the moment, a manager's voice calling Jimin's name, urgency laced through it. Reality rushed back in, sharp and unforgiving. Jimin pulled away, running a hand over his face, rebuilding himself piece by piece. "We can't finish this now," he said, voice steady again but eyes still burning. "But don't think this is over." Jungkook nodded, heart pounding. "I don't want it to be." Jimin opened the door, the noise of the world flooding in. But before stepping out, he glanced back once more, a look filled with promise and warning all at once. Jungkook stayed in the dim room, breathing in the aftermath, knowing that whatever line had been crossed on that stage could never be erased, and that the next time they faced each other, pretending would no longer be an option. The van ride back to the hotel felt longer than the entire concert, the city lights sliding across the tinted windows like restless ghosts. Jungkook sat with his hood pulled low, fingers worrying the ring on his thumb, replaying every word, every look, every breath he had stolen on stage. Across from him, Jimin stared straight ahead, jaw tight, posture perfect, the familiar mask back in place. The distance between them was less than a meter and felt like a lifetime. "You're shaking," Jungkook said quietly, breaking the silence that had stretched too long to be accidental. Jimin didn't look at him. "Don't start." "I'm not starting," Jungkook replied, voice edged with restraint. "I'm noticing." That made Jimin laugh, short and brittle. "You noticed a lot tonight." "Because you finally let me," Jungkook shot back. "You looked at me like you wanted to say something and then you didn't. That's worse than never looking at all." Jimin turned then, eyes flashing in the dim light. "You think that look was permission? Jungkook, that look was fear." "Fear of what?" Jungkook leaned forward, elbows on his knees, refusing to retreat. "Of me or of yourself?" The van hit a bump, the driver muttering an apology, but neither of them moved. Jimin's voice dropped. "Of losing everything we built." "We're already losing something," Jungkook said. "We just pretend it doesn't matter." Back at the hotel, the hallway was eerily quiet, the carpet muffling their footsteps as they walked side by side to Jimin's room. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded louder than any lock. Jimin set his phone down, exhaling as if he'd been holding his breath since the stage lights went out. "You crossed a line tonight," Jimin said, finally letting the control slip. "The media's already buzzing. They noticed. They always notice." Jungkook stepped closer. "They noticed honesty. That's not a crime." "It is for us," Jimin snapped, then faltered. He turned away, palms braced against the desk. "I've seen how fast love turns into a weapon." Jungkook's chest tightened. "Is that what you think this is? A weakness?" "I think it's dangerous," Jimin said, voice low and raw. "I think if I let myself want what you want, I won't survive the fallout." Jungkook reached out, stopping just short of touching him. "Look at me," he said softly. Jimin hesitated, then turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole the breath from Jungkook's lungs. The bravado was gone. The careful leader was gone. What remained was a man who had been holding himself together for too long. "When you stopped singing," Jimin confessed, "I felt exposed, like everyone could see exactly what I feel every time you smile at me like that. I hate that you have that power." Jungkook swallowed. "I never wanted power over you, I just wanted you." The words hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Jimin took a step forward, then another until there was no space left. "You don't understand," he said, voice trembling. "If this breaks, it won't break quietly." "Neither will I if it doesn't," Jungkook replied, just as unsteady. "I'm done pretending this doesn't hurt." Jimin's hand lifted, hovering near Jungkook's chest, fingers curled as if afraid to touch and afraid not to. "Say it," he challenged, eyes burning. "Say what you're really asking for." Jungkook met his gaze, heart pounding. "I'm asking you to stop hiding from me." Jimin's breath hitched, and for a moment Jungkook thought he might pull away again. Instead, Jimin pressed his forehead to Jungkook's, a fragile, intimate collision. "You're reckless," he whispered. "You always have been." "And you love that about me," Jungkook murmured. Jimin laughed softly, the sound breaking. "That's the problem." They stood there, tangled in truth and hesitation, the room thick with unsaid promises. Outside, the world waited with its cameras and rumors and sharp edges, but inside, all that mattered was the heat of shared breath and the terrifying realization that neither of them could walk away anymore. When Jimin finally stepped back, his eyes were wet but resolute. "We can't go back to how it was," he said. Jungkook nodded, a mix of fear and relief crashing through him. "I don't want to." Jimin picked up his phone, glancing at the screen as notifications piled in, his expression hardening. "Then whatever happens next," he said quietly, "we face it knowing we chose this." Jungkook watched him, heart racing, aware that tonight had changed the shape of everything, and that love, once exposed, could no longer be contained without leaving scars. Morning came too fast, pale light slicing through the hotel curtains like an accusation. Jungkook woke to the vibration of his phone, message after message stacking before he could even focus his eyes. He didn't need to open them to know what they were about. The air itself felt heavier, charged with consequence. A sharp knock cut through the room. "Jungkook," Jimin's voice, low and urgent, slipped through the door. "Open up." Jungkook crossed the room and pulled the door open. Jimin stepped inside immediately, hair unstyled, eyes rimmed red, phone clenched in his hand like a weapon. He locked the door behind him. "It's everywhere," Jimin said without preamble, shoving the phone toward Jungkook. Screenshots, slowed-down clips, headlines that danced just close enough to the truth to be lethal. "They're dissecting the way you looked at me, the pause, the lyrics you changed." Jungkook scanned the screen, jaw tightening. "We knew this would happen." "No," Jimin snapped, voice breaking. "I knew, you hoped it wouldn't." That stung because it was true. "I hoped," Jungkook said quietly, "that once, just once, we could be human without being punished for it." Jimin turned away, packing. "You think I don't want that? I want it so badly it scares me, but hope doesn't protect us. Strategy does." Jungkook watched him, the way Jimin's fingers shook when he scrolled, the way his shoulders stayed rigid like he was bracing for impact. "You're already hurting," Jungkook said. "All your strategies didn't stop that." Jimin stopped abruptly. "Because you keep pushing." "Because you keep running." Jimin whirled around, eyes flashing. "I'm not running, I'm surviving." "By cutting yourself in half," Jungkook's voice rose despite himself. "By acting like what we feel is a liability." Jimin's lips trembled. "It is." Silence crashed between them, thick and brutal. Jungkook stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then tell me to let go. Look at me and say you don't feel it." Jimin opened his mouth, closed it, his breath hitched, betraying him. "I can't," he whispered. The admission cracked something open. Jungkook reached out, fingers brushing Jimin's wrist, grounding and electric all at once. Jimin didn't pull away. Instead, his hand curled into Jungkook's shirt, gripping hard, like he was afraid Jungkook might vanish if he didn't hold on. "This is what I'm afraid of," Jimin said, voice shaking. "If I let myself fall, I won't know how to stand back up." Jungkook rested his forehead against Jimin's. "Then don't stand alone." A tear slipped free before Jimin could stop it. He laughed bitterly. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple," Jungkook said. "It's just honest." Jimin inhaled sharply, then pulled back, wiping his face, the leader resurfacing. "We need to talk to management, together." Jungkook nodded. No more deciding alone. The meeting was brutal. Words like image, risk, control were thrown around like shields. Jungkook spoke when he had to, Jimin when he could, both of them holding their ground in ways they never had before. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a surrender either. Hours later, back in the quiet of the room, exhaustion settled into Jungkook's bones. Jimin sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. "I don't know what the future looks like," Jimin said softly. Jungkook sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I know what it feels like when you look at me," he replied, "and I don't want to lose that." Jimin turned, studying Jungkook's face like it held an answer. "You really stopped singing because of me." Jungkook smiled faintly. "I stopped because my heart didn't know how to lie anymore." Jimin let out a shaky breath, then leaned in, resting his head on Jungkook's shoulder. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't hidden either, just real. "Stay," Jimin murmured. Jungkook wrapped an arm around him without hesitation. I am. The studio lights were too bright, unforgiving in the way they revealed every crack you tried to hide. Jungkook sat on the edge of the couch, bouncing his knee, watching Jimin across the room argue with a producer in hushed but heated tones. Words like narrative, clarification, damage control floated through the air like threats. Jungkook felt the familiar urge to shrink, to let Jimin take the weight alone, and hated himself for it. No, Jimin said sharply, finally losing patience. We're not issuing a denial. The room froze. The producer blinked. Jimin, think carefully. Silence is one thing, refusing to correct assumptions is another. Jimin crossed his arms, jaw tight. Correcting them would mean lying. All eyes shifted to Jungkook. His pulse spiked, heat flooding his face, but he didn't look away. For once, he didn't want to be invisible. If you push this, the producer warned, you're inviting controversy. Jungkook stood. His voice surprised everyone, steady despite the chaos inside him. We're already in it. Jimin turned, shock flickering across his face before something warmer took its place. Pride, relief, fear still but shared now. The meeting dissolved soon after, not resolved but altered, like a fault line newly exposed. Outside, the hallway smelled of coffee and anxiety. Jimin leaned against the wall, rubbing his temples. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did, Jungkook replied. I'm tired of hiding behind you. Jimin looked at him then, really looked, eyes searching. You're changing. Jungkook exhaled. I think I always wanted to. They ended up on the rooftop later, the city spread beneath them, neon and restless. The wind tugged at Jimin's jacket, carrying the distant sound of traffic. Jungkook stepped closer, drawn by habit and something deeper. Do you remember, Jimin said suddenly, the first time I realized this wasn't safe? Jungkook shook his head. It was years ago, Jimin continued. You laughed at something stupid I said, and I felt seen. Not as a leader, not as an idea, just as me. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I knew then this would either save me or ruin me. Jungkook's chest ached. I didn't know. I know, Jimin said softly. That's why I tried to carry it alone. Jungkook reached out, fingers brushing Jimin's sleeve. You don't have to anymore. Jimin's laugh was quiet, disbelieving. You say that like the world will suddenly be kind. I don't need the world, Jungkook said, voice low. I need you to stop pushing me away when it gets hard. Jimin turned, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. And if staying close hurts you? Then at least it'll be honest pain, Jungkook answered. Not this slow, quiet erosion. The words landed heavy. Jimin stepped into Jungkook's space, close enough that their breaths mingled. You really won't back down, will you? Jungkook shook his head, heart pounding. Not anymore. For a second, Jimin looked like he might kiss him, or cry, or both. Instead, he pressed his forehead to Jungkook, hands gripping the fabric of his jacket like an anchor. I'm terrified, Jimin admitted. Of what they'll say, of what I'll lose, of how much I want this. Jungkook closed his eyes. Me too. They stayed there, suspended between fear and longing, until Jimin finally pulled back, wiping his face, determination hardening his features. There's an interview tomorrow, Jimin said. They'll ask about the concert, about us. Jungkook swallowed. What are you going to say? Jimin met his gaze, something fierce and fragile burning there. The truth, he said. As much of it as they let me. Jungkook felt his heart slam against his ribs, terror and hope colliding. Whatever happens, he said, I'm with you. Jimin nodded once, then reached out, squeezing Jungkook's hand openly, no shadows, no corners to hide in. Below them, the city roared on, unaware that something irreversible had already begun. The studio for the interview was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Jungkook could feel it in his bones as he sat beside Jimin under the white lights, their knees almost touching, hands resting deliberately on their own laps. Cameras hovered like patient predators. The host smiled too easily. So, she began, glancing at her tablet, let's talk about that moment on stage. Jimin inhaled slowly, the way he did before difficult choreography. Jungkook felt it beside him, a subtle shift in the air. "What moment?" Jimin asked calmly. The host raised an eyebrow. When Jungkook stopped singing. A ripple of tension passed through the room. Jungkook's heart thudded, but he didn't look away. He stared straight ahead, jaw set. "I stopped because I needed to," Jungkook said before Jimin could speak. His voice was steady, but it cost him something. "Sometimes music asks you to be honest." The host's smile sharpened. "Honest about what?" Jimin turned his head then, slowly, deliberately, and looked at Jungkook on camera. It was the same look from the stage, softer now but no less devastating. "About connection," Jimin said. "About being human." The silence that followed was thick. Somewhere behind the cameras, someone shifted nervously. "People are speculating," the host pressed, "about the nature of that connection." Jimin nodded once. "People always do." "And are they wrong?" Jungkook felt the old fear surge, the instinct to retreat to let Jimin deflect. Instead, he turned toward him, meeting his gaze openly. "We care about each other," Jungkook said. "Deeply." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a confession shaped for headlines. It was worse and better than both. The interview ended soon after, cut short by mutual agreement and a room full of people pretending not to feel the aftershock. Backstage, the walls seemed closer, the air louder. Jimin leaned against a table, hands shaking as the adrenaline drained. "You didn't have to say that," he murmured. Jungkook stepped closer. "I wanted to." Jimin laughed softly, disbelief and affection tangled together. "You're really doing this." "I'm really tired of not doing it," Jungkook replied. They were interrupted by raised voices down the hall, a manager arguing with someone on the phone. Words like consequences and timing floated toward them, sharp-edged. Jimin closed his eyes briefly. "This is where it gets ugly," he said. Jungkook reached for his hand without thinking. Jimin froze for half a second, then laced their fingers together, holding on like it was the only solid thing left. "Look at me," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin did. "I'm scared," Jimin admitted, "but I'm also relieved, and that scares me more." Jungkook smiled, small and sad and brave all at once. "Relief means you're not alone anymore." Later, alone in the hotel room again, the noise of the world muted by thick glass and distance, Jimin sat on the floor, back against the bed, exhaustion finally claiming him. Jungkook lowered himself beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "I spent years telling myself I could handle this alone," Jimin said, staring at the carpet. "That if I just stayed strong enough, careful enough, nothing would break." "And now?" Jungkook asked. "And now I realize I was already broken," Jimin said softly, just quietly. Jungkook leaned his head against Jimin's, eyes burning. "I don't want quiet anymore." Jimin turned, their faces inches apart. "You're changing the rules." "Or finally admitting they never fit us," Jungkook replied. For a long moment, they just breathed together, the weight of everything pressing in but not crushing them. Jimin reached up, thumb brushing the corner of Jungkook's eye, a touch so gentle it almost hurt. "Whatever happens next," Jimin said, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it, "I don't regret looking at you on that stage." Jungkook covered Jimin's hand with his own. "Me neither." Outside, the city continued its relentless hum, rumors already forming, opinions sharpening, but inside the room there was a fragile, defiant calm. They didn't know how the story would end, only that it had finally begun in truth, and that for the first time, neither of them was facing it alone. The backlash didn't arrive like a storm. It seeped in like poison. Jungkook woke to Jimin's phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand, the sound sharp and relentless. Jimin reached for it, eyes still half closed, and then sat up too fast, color draining from his face as he scrolled. "What is it?" Jungkook asked, already sitting up. Jimin didn't answer at first. His jaw tightened, lips pressing into a thin line Jungkook recognized immediately. It was the expression Jimin wore when he was trying not to break. "They want to separate us," Jimin said finally, voice flat. Jungkook's chest constricted. "Who?" "Management, PR, everyone with a title." Jimin let out a humorless laugh. They think distance will cool things down, different schedules, no joint appearances for a while. Jungkook swung his legs off the bed, anger flaring hot and sudden. So the solution is pretending we don't exist to each other. They're calling it protection, Jimin replied. For you, for me, for the group. And what about us? Jungkook snapped, standing now, hands shaking. Do we even get mentioned in this plan? Jimin finally looked up at him, eyes dark with exhaustion. This is exactly what I was afraid of. No, Jungkook shot back. This is exactly what you used to warn me about to keep me quiet. The words landed hard. Jimin flinched like he'd been struck. That's not fair, Jimin said sharply. I'm trying to hold everything together. By pushing me out, Jungkook's voice cracked despite his effort. Because that's what this feels like. Silence stretched, thick and painful. Jimin stood, walking to the window, staring down at the city far below like it might offer answers. Do you think I want this? He asked quietly. Do you think it doesn't kill me to hear them talk about you like you're something fragile that needs to be locked away from me? Jungkook stepped closer. Then don't let them. Jimin turned, frustration blazing. You think it's that simple. One wrong move and they'll tear you apart. They'll blame you. I won't let that happen. And I won't let you decide that alone anymore, Jungkook said, matching his intensity. I'm not a child you need to shield. Jimin laughed bitterly. You're worse, you're brave. The room vibrated with unsaid things, years of restraint clawing for release. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, breathing hard. I meant what I said in that interview. I care about you. I'm not taking it back just because it scares people. Jimin's voice dropped, dangerous and raw. And if it destroys everything we've worked for? Jungkook stepped right into his space, close enough that there was no room left to retreat. Then at least it'll be the truth that does it, not silence. Not fear. Jimin stared at him, chest rising fast, conflict raging across his face. You're asking me to gamble with more than just my heart. I'm asking you to trust me with yours, Jungkook replied softly. The words shattered something. Jimin's composure finally cracked, anger dissolving into something fierce and aching. He grabbed Jungkook's collar, not pulling him closer, not pushing him away, just holding on like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. I hate how much you matter, Jimin whispered. I hate that one look from you can undo years of discipline. Jungkook's hands came up, steady despite the storm inside him. Then stop undoing yourself alone. Jimin's breath hitched. For a second, it looked like he might argue again, might retreat behind responsibility and fear. Instead, he sagged forward, forehead pressing against Jungkook's shoulder, grip tightening. I'm so tired, Jimin admitted, voice breaking. I'm tired of being the strong one. Jungkook wrapped his arms around him without hesitation. Then don't be, not with me. They stayed like that, tangled and breathing, until the noise in Jimin's phone began again. Messages, missed calls, reality clawing back. Jimin pulled away reluctantly, wiping his face, resolve hardening even as his eyes remained soft. They want a statement, he said. Something clean, controlled. Jungkook swallowed. And what do you want? Jimin looked at him, really looked at him, as if weighing the cost and deciding it was worth paying. I want to stop lying, he said, even if I have to choose my words carefully. Jungkook nodded, heart pounding. Then I'll stand there with you. Jimin's lips curved into a small, fierce smile. You always were trouble. And you always loved that, Jungkook replied. Jimin reached out, squeezing Jungkook's hand, not hiding this time even though the curtains were open and the world was watching. Outside, the city buzzed with speculation and judgment, but inside the room, something irreversible had settled between them. A decision made not out of recklessness, but out of finally choosing each other over fear. The statement was released just before midnight, carefully worded, calm on the surface, honest enough beneath it to make the world pause. Jungkook read it once, then again, his heart pounding harder with each line. Jimin stood beside him, arms crossed, posture steady, eyes fixed on the city lights beyond the window. They'll read between the lines, Jungkook said quietly. I know, Jimin replied. That's the point. The reaction was immediate. Praise and outrage collided online, headlines contradicting each other within minutes. Some called it brave, others called it reckless. Jungkook felt the familiar tremor of fear rise, but it didn't swallow him this time. He felt Jimin's presence like an anchor, solid and warm. When the phone finally went silent, Jimin exhaled deeply, like someone setting down a weight he'd carried for too long. "Whatever happens now," he said, "we don't pretend anymore." Jungkook nodded. "I don't think I could even if I tried." They didn't touch for a long moment. Not because they didn't want to, but because the stillness felt sacred. Outside, the city continued its endless noise, but inside the room there was a calm Jungkook had never known. It wasn't certainty. It was acceptance. Days passed, schedules shifted. Some doors closed quietly, others opened unexpectedly. The world didn't end, it changed shape. The next concert came faster than Jungkook expected. Standing backstage, microphone warm in his hand, he felt the old nerves creep in. He glanced to the side instinctively and found Jimin already watching him. No fear there this time, just trust. "Sing," Jimin said softly. Jungkook smiled, small and real. He walked onto the stage, the lights blinding, the crowd roaring. When the chorus came, the same one that had shattered everything before, Jungkook didn't hesitate. He sang it through, voice steady, heart open. And when he looked at Jimin again, it wasn't a breaking look anymore. It was a knowing one. Later, after the noise faded and the night settled, they sat together in quiet, shoulders touching. Jimin rested his head back, eyes closed. "I don't regret it," Jimin said. "Me neither," Jungkook replied. They didn't need to say more. The love between them wasn't loud now. It didn't need to be. It had survived fear, silence, and the weight of the world's gaze. What remained was something deeper, steadier, earned. And for the first time, Jungkook understood that stopping had never been the moment that changed everything. It was choosing to keep singing, together,